Hi, this is Dana Vermillion with week 8 for our final project for the course. And I'm just going to be discussing kind of the different aspects of each of the individual parts of this project and then kind of the culminating factors and kind of the conclusions that I've come to with each of the sections. So one of the first things that we talked about is the hardware and software that's needed. And coming up with this, I was trying to decide whether I wanted everything on the local docking station or if we wanted to do separate locations. I decided I want to go with separate locations, mostly from the aspect of growth. If everything was stored on the docking station, then any other docking station that I created would have to have everything installed on there. And no matter what, they'd have to send the data somewhere else eventually with the type of growth. So what I decided is that I'd have two locations, a headquarters location, and then each of the docking stations would be their own location on its own, and they would just send the information to the headquarters location. So with that, ensuring that there's firewall protections, VPN routers to make sure that everything is secure going through the connection. And the biggest things is on the computer side of both sides of the headquarters and the docking stations. I just need to make sure that the proper OSs are on there, the proper processors, proper storage, everything like that. And I think the biggest thing with this one is that I decided I want to do dual locations for that possible growth of the company in the future. Next thing that we really talked about was security and what we were going to do to protect the system. And I just mentioned before is having a firewall on every protection or every location for the extra layer of protection. Make sure it's a little bit harder if someone tries to breach us to access our information. The other thing that we're going to have is our VPN routers, so the information going to and from the docking station is secure and doesn't get corrupted on the way out. The other thing that I have on mine is I'm going to have a IDS and IPS and an IDS, running on the headquarters location, so it's constantly being monitored for any type of known threats or known security hacking capabilities that anyone would be using. So I'm going to have those constantly monitoring to make sure there's nothing corrupted in the system or no one's trying to get in the system or try to bypass it. If money isn't an object, I'd probably add multiple servers that have different information, some few different security measures, but that's what I primarily start off with for the first part. The next thing we did was actually writing code for Python, and we had to write our code for how to check the subscription status and then charge people accordingly. For my code, it's kind of the biggest thing in especially how the docking station itself is going to work. The first step is it's going to check that person to see if they have a subscription. If it's an annual subscription, if they have one, does the dates match up? Is it over 365 days? If it is, ask them if they would like another one. If they don't have an annual subscription, offer them one. And then if they don't want that either, have them purchase a daily pass. And then after that, I had my Python code written out that it would calculate the timestamp that they took out the bike and the timestamp that they came back. And then I'd calculate the minutes off of that, which would then output the price. Them being a annual subscriber, it wouldn't charge them anything because they've already paid in full for their subscription. If it was a daily rider, it would then calculate the price based on the amount of time that they had the ride for. Next thing we talked about was the database structure and actually creating the databases. So what I came to use for this project, or what I thought would be the best thing to use, is I would just use an SQL database, just primarily on the reliability and the stability of it. Nothing really fancy has to go on here. We're not changing data that constantly. We're not having thousands of transactions or something going on. It's very simple. Someone's going to check out the bike. It's going to store the person's name. It's going to store the time that they took it out. It's going to store the docking station that they took it out from and just store it in a line. And then when they check it back in, store that time, store that location that they return the bike at. There's nothing too fancy that has to go on. So I think just for the reliability and stability that an SQL database provides, I would use that. I would have a few different tables for the users, the rides, checking the status, have a list of all the annual subscribers, and have their dates that they purchase it on to make sure nothing's expired, or if they do expire, then offer them that new subscription. But just for the pure reliability that SQL would provide, I would use that database structure and store all the information that way. So then the docking station just has to translate that information over, and then it would store at the headquarters location on the servers there. And then the last part that we did for the course project was using an API. And what I found was a thing called GeoBytes API. And what that did was you can actually put in 2 different locations, either by the city, or you can actually put it in by longitude and latitude, and then it would use then it would calculate the distance on road that it would take to get from one location to the other. And with this information, I kind of decided that where I would start implementing my bike program, couldn't think of the words, I would do it in New York City. I primarily start in Manhattan for multiple reasons. Streets are overcrowded with bikes already, and they already have bike lanes. Taxis are expensive. Subways, depending on the schedule that it is, they may not go to the right place. They may not go exactly the direction you want to. You may still have to walk. So I think implementing a bike sharing program in New York City, primarily in Manhattan to start off with, would be the most beneficial. They have a large population base. Like I said, they have the bike lanes already there. Traffic is bad, and this is a cheap, efficient, and a healthy alternative to people using one of those other options. So I would start with implementing in Manhattan, and then using that GeoBytes, I can tell the distance of locations, how long it takes to get to one to the other. We don't want to have docking stations over the top of each other, so it's just too flooded with them that we're not able to rent out enough bikes. But we want to also have the distance close enough that you don't want to have to ride the bike 2 miles out of your way to find a docking station. So using that GeoBytes API that I found, I can calculate how far in between docking stations it would take to ride the bike there, to make sure that they're spread out enough that they're not on top of each other, but close enough that you can get to a docking station pretty easily, that people don't have to go looking for one. And then once you grow in Manhattan, I also calculate a distance to the other boroughs, so then I'd move out to like the Bronx and then Queens and so on and so forth, or even move to a different city at that point. But that API did help me kind of figure out the distance and how many docking stations there would need to be. So money not being an option, you can implement them all right now, or obviously needing to grow and get more capital, you would want to implement a few and then grow from there. That's about all that I have for my project. I learned a lot over all the different steps that we did. But on a personal note, it's been fun, everybody. Thanks for a great class. I've learned a lot off of all of you. Yeah, thanks.